one on epidemiology and control of epidemic meningitis in Africa. We've had one on immunological responses after we've treated with sertraline, with an antifungal when you're treating cryptococcal meningitis. Then we've had how quality of life in patients with end-stage kidney disease. So those are very interesting topics, and I think we have many questions for them. Yes?
This one goes to the last presenter. Can you tell us the tool you are using to measure the quality of life for these patients with chronic kidney disease? Thank you.
Another question? Yes?
I have a question for Caroline, please, Dr. Trotter. So, just with respect to meningitis detection in the UK, of course, for many years we've had the public health campaign and using the non-blanchable bottom of a glass test. And I've just wondered what sort of public education is done in countries like Africa with the same name.
We could have another question.
Question for peace. Are there any gender differences in people who actually try and access dialysis in Uganda?
So maybe we could respond to those ones.
Thank you very much. There's gender differences in the dialysis unit in that we have more males than females. We think the reason is because more males are able to afford compared to females, and also looking maybe at the transplant trends, we know for sure that more females donate compared to men kidney transplants. So that may also explain why there's less females than males in the dialysis unit. And then the tool we are using, it's simply called the Kidney Disease Quality of Life tool. It was developed by the RAND Corporation in conjunction with the University of Wisconsin, and it's available on the net for use. Anybody wants to use it, but we had to validate it. So we actually did a pilot in the beginning to validate it. We did a cultural adaptation for the Ugandan setting, removing things like family blocks and things that really are not applicable. So we did cultural adaptation for Ugandan setting. We also did translation into Luganda, the local language that we are using, and then we did some psychometrics to make sure it's validated for our setting.
Thank you. So to address the question of what sort of public education is done for meningitis, you're right, in the UK every parent knows about meningitis and septicemia and are terrified of it, and every doctor knows about it, and the charities actually have done a fantastic job in really pushing this and working with the Department of Health to make sure that everyone's aware of this disease and the need to seek treatment quickly to reduce mortality. Now, this is not done consistently everywhere. The UK is a good model, and I would say it's probably rather piecemeal elsewhere. Interestingly, the Meningitis Research Foundation have got a new project in Gulu in Uganda, so they're developing tools to increase awareness as part of that. And one of the pillars for this roadmap for meningitis is really going to be about increasing awareness of meningitis to encourage prompt treatment.
So what struck me, Caroline, was you mentioned a 10% mortality rate. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a meningitis expert, but what struck me as being quite low.
So some people
therefore quite good.
Some people might never reach the health facilities where this event is taking
so
place.
They don't get counted. Right?
So they won't get counted.
Okay.
Yes?
Thank you very much. David, thank you for the interesting work. Just curious to know whether there's any microbiology done on the crypto. Is there culture done? Anything done to the organisms, like characterizing them genetically? If not, that's the packaging. Do you have any plans to study the patients more, say, in light of their genetics? That's important to you.
Thank you, David. So we use, we work with a microbiology lab to do quantitative cultures, which is sort of not standard for most labs that culture CSF. And so because of that, we also have CSF isolates, cryptococcal isolates that are stored. We are open to collaboration, and although we have done some, in collaboration with people at the University of Minnesota, have done some, it hasn't really been specific in terms of genetic diversity of the organism that we have here, but there have been some plans developed. And we do have isolates, so those are available for other people to use as well.
Yes, David, I noticed that either you are planning, you are already doing many clinical trials. Are those going on concurrently? Actually, I lost count, I was trying to count, and you moved on. So, if they're concurrent, what is the machinery you're using to do those clinical trials? Yeah. And also, do you anticipate having enough patients to do those studies? Caroline, would there be an argument for giving meningitis vaccine, vaccine nationwide, given that the disease, the threat for the disease is up in those northern and western districts? Would there be a place?
Thank you, Professor. So, sorry, are you taking more questions?
Yeah, you can.
So interesting question. In applying for a couple of these grants, obviously we were not sure whether they would all be funded. And some of them have been industry driven. But it just so happened, I think, in the last 6 months, somehow 3 or 4 trials have been funded. And I agree, it does present a bit of a problem, a good problem, I think, because then you need to figure out how you're going to do it. So a couple of them are phase 1, phase 2 trials, which means fairly small numbers initially. And the other thing I think that has happened with the epidemiology of cryptococcal meningitis specifically is it appears that because of this ART test and start, because of the ART test and start strategy, there are many more patients coming in now with unmasking of cryptococcal meningitis, simply because I think there's a lag between screening and preemptive therapy and actually starting ART in terms of the program implementation. So I think over the the current clinical trial that's going on is the Ambition trial, the single-dose liposomal amphotericin. And I think the last 8 months we have enrolled about 115 patients between Mulago and Mbarara. And so we anticipate that there are still going to be many more patients with cryptococcal meningitis. TB meningitis, as patients come into the hospital and are screened for meningitis because they have symptoms suggested, the diagnostic pathways, you sort of test for everything. So TB meningitis as well as cryptococcal meningitis. So I think for now there's no shortage of patients. The Ambition trial is it's a multi-site trial that's in 6 countries around Africa, and we are basically the leading recruiter of patients in the whole trial. I'm not sure what's going to happen 5 years from now if more and more people are being tested early and starting ART before they have advanced HIV disease. But the current trend of things looks like there are still many more patients with advanced HIV disease. So.
Thank you for the question. So for Uganda, there was quite a comprehensive risk assessment done across the country, and they virtually look back over the past 30, 40 years of data and literature reports. And all the outbreaks who are in this northern western region. So probably it's not worth immunising nationwide, and actually many countries have it partly in the belt and partly out, and have had campaigns in one area, not the other. There may be pragmatic reasons why you might want to roll out routine immunisation nationwide. So in Ghana, where only the northern regions are at risk, they've decided to have the routine immunisation at 18 months nationwide, because it's too difficult to have a separate immunisation programme for certain regions and not others. And I think Nigeria are following a similar policy for routine immunisation.
Thank you. Any burning questions? Two more questions.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really burning, but thank you, presenters, for those enlightening presentations. My question is directed to Dr. Bagasha about the end-stage kidney disease. And I was looking at the statement that you started off with, and your closing slides. The statement started off by saying there was this patient who was wishing God would take their life before they deplete the resources of their family. Because management of end-stage kidney disease is not only expensive, but creates a sense of hopelessness. Then your closing slides were talking about your engagement and engaging the parliamentarians, which is very remarkable. You must be a mover and a shaker if you have managed to loop in the parliamentarians. So I was thinking, even as much as it is very important to take care of the end-stage kidney disease patients, would along the way, did you come across thoughts of you wish you could have intervened much earlier? And can you give us your insights on how you are going to move into the preventive approach? Because it's also very disheartening to see that the opening statement of your background is that we have a 23% prevalence of the disease, which is higher than the rate for the rest of the world. So can you give us some hope on how we can turn these numbers upside down? Thank you. This was his invitation.
Yeah, thank you, presenters. I have two questions. One is for Peace, Dr. Peace. Yeah, talking about quality of life, I'm just wondering whether there's the point at which you recruit these patients would have an influence, on their reported quality of life. For example, if somebody, you recruit a patient at the point of diagnosis, and then you recruit another one, let's say maybe a few months later, whether it would have an influence. And secondly, to Professor David Meya, I saw in your results, I don't know if I saw it well, the control, you said they are the placebo arm. But then again, when you're presenting your results, I was seeing the fluconazole. So I'm wondering whether it's the fluconazole you're terming the placebo. And if indeed it was the placebo arm, wasn't there any alternative? Thank you.
So for the first question, so it's very discouraging because many of the patients who come with end-stage kidney disease actually at the end of the road. We have our patients clinic. We usually get maybe 10 new patients, and out of those 10 new patients, usually 8 have reached end stage because of the nature of kidney disease. It begins to show manifestations that when you reach the end of the road. So it's actually quite disheartening. But in involving the parliamentarians, what we actually asked for was that we should have hemodialysis unit at all the regional referral hospitals. So we counted 13 regional referral hospitals. So if we have hemodialysis unit at all of those units, that not only increases awareness, people actually have the treatments there, and then they have subsidized cost, and that actually reduces the cost of treatment. But that's for people who have reached the end of the road. People, before they reach the end of the road, we're encouraging more and more screening for patients. So if you have high blood pressure, do a urine test, do a blood test, because that's usually the only way that you can actually find out and then get routine care. So this big campaign to increase awareness, it's actually been in the media, on the news, we've had lots of public engagement, is usually aimed at prevention. And then the regional referral hospitals and the parliamentary support is aimed at having dialysis therapies. And then for the question about recruitment and quality of life at that point, that is why we have designed our study in such a way that every 3 months we repeat the tool to see how the scores are changing as we go along. And maybe quality of life may be bad at the beginning when you just got a new diagnosis, and then when you get used to it, it becomes better. That's what we're going to find out when we do the 3-monthly reviews.
Sorry that I wasn't very clear. So for this clinical trial, patients with cryptococcal meningitis were getting randomized to either receive placebo plus fluconazole or they were receiving sertraline plus fluconazole. So that's the, I hope that makes it clear.
Come to the end of. I would like to thank the panelists and the audience for the good job. We are going for a health break. Thank you very much. So we are going for a health break. But as you go out, please, if you received a questionnaire, please return it to the